Welcome back to another episode of the Packs What She Said podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Maggie Loney, joined this week by a very special guest, Dusty Evely of Cheesehead TV, Packer Report, Pack a Day podcast, the Watch and Stuff podcast. Honestly, if you follow Packs What She Said, you know Dusty. Dusty's been on the show before. So excited that he can be here to join me. Kind of wish we had started recording 5 minutes ago when we were talking about Shark Exorcist and Birdemic and
Slaughterhouse.
Slaughterhouse. Yeah, but I don't know. Honestly, maybe the Packers Raiders game will kind of mimic that same vibe when we get into the discussion about what went right, because not a lot did. And what went wrong in, of course, the Packers week 5 loss to the Raiders 17-13 in Vegas. Dusty, first, thank you so much for joining me. And
Thank you.
second, what'd you think of the game? How'd you like it?
It was great. I loved it. I had a blast. No, it was frustrating. It was awful. It was one of those. The parallel I was going to draw was like there was a Monday night game years ago when Cutler was with the Bears. One of the few times the Bears beat the Packers, and it was I think the Packers set their team record for penalties that day. It was like 17 penalties. One of the ending ones was Jay Cutler throwing a floater interception to Charles Woodson, and but then getting like a ticky-tack DPI and Cutler on the ground celebrating after an interception. That's my lasting impression of that game. And the feeling I had watching it is the feeling I had watching this for entirely different reasons. We're just this. It's very like you're 2 or 3 plays away. You're right there. You felt like the entire game. Okay, at some point, they're getting this thing on the rails, even if just for a drive. They're going to put this thing away, and it's just so frustrating. They were so close so many times, and they could not put it away. This was their worst game in the red zone all season against a defense that was very bad in the red zone. I mean, defense that was bad in general, but I think the Raiders were giving up like 29th in the league. I think they were giving up touchdowns like 75% of opponents' trips to the red zone or something like that. So all like you had a handful of big plays, not very many, but a handful. I was gonna say they finally got their running game back on track, but they didn't. Like AJ Dillon had like less than 4 yards per carry. It was just better than 2.2 or whatever. So just the whole game, I'm talking way too much, as is my want, Maggie. But it was extremely frustrating game, like punctuated by that interception at the end. Just this felt like it was close. The ball's in the air. I allowed myself to have a little hope. I should not have done that, and then the ball was picked off. Felt like it was so close. Frustrating loss. The bye weeks here, which is good. I mean, they can hopefully fix some stuff, but yeah, you're going in on kind of a sour note for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, Perry and I had talked about it after, I think it was the Falcons game, maybe the Saints game, which obviously we watched together live. The sense that you got, and that game looked hopeless in the first half. It was not
Yes.
a fun environment at Lambeau. The crowd wasn't really into it at that point, but it still kind of felt like Jordan Love could make something happen with the offense. And I don't know about you. I mean, there's takes all over Twitter. I try to stay off the internet after a loss for that very reason, and also after a win, because I think, your perspective is kind of skewed regardless. But what do you think the issue is right now with the offense? We talked about it a little bit after the Saints game, right? Where we said, how can you tell if there's even growing pains when your offense isn't cohesively out on the field? You're dealing with injuries. Aaron Jones isn't playing. That adds a wrinkle, of course. We thought he would go against the Raiders. Didn't happen. Is this a Matt LeFluer thing? Is this a Jordan Love thing? Is this a young offense thing? Is it all of the above that makes it just completely difficult to get anything going? Because the first couple weeks of the season, I had said to Perry, I think it was after the Falcons game, like, I I kind of thought, Jordan Love can march down the field and he can make something happen, and I have that trust in him, and I still feel that way after the
Mm-hmm.
after the Raiders game. I think he can be the guy. Small sample size, but something's got to give on the offensive side of the ball, and we
Yeah.
haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's young guys, it's execution. I mean, I think like Love. It's a funny thing. I was rewatching the game and I was like, in a vacuum, Love played better than I thought he did.
Mhm.
I know there's a stat going around that he was 2 for 10 at passes over 10 yards down the field or something like that, which is 100% true. But those passes were like he had 1 for 11, he had 1 for 13, and then nothing else under 30, and he had 2 above 40, like just shocking. So he was 2 for 10 because everything was like. Well, and that's the funny thing. Everything was not just short; it was outside the numbers, which I have been laughing about because for years it was they had a quarterback who steadfastly refused to throw in the middle of the field. Now they want to. What they want to do is they want to attack the middle of the field, and they can't. So now they're forced to throw outside the numbers. So I mean, I think some of it's offensive line. I think plays a big part in it. Aaron Jones not being there plays a big part in it. This is a stat. I think I mentioned this somewhere else multiple times. I think this week. at random wherever things. Even in the first game, that Bears game, that was their best rushing performance of the year, which was, of course, Jones was there most of the time. They had 1 yard before contact that entire game. 1 yard. It was Jones making stuff happen after. Like they weren't getting push even then. Even this game was better because of doing this kind of vertical push. It was kind of more of the what suits AJ Dillon's style, where they're kind of, you're pushing straight ahead. You're not kind of relying on the wide zone. A lot of the pull stuff they want to do earlier, they kind of abandoned that because Dillon can't do it. But they can't move the linebackers out of the field. They wanted to go heavy play action, and they can't. Like that was even the first interception. Like they can't. The linebackers are not respecting it. They can't do it, so everything's outside the numbers. And I thought Love, for his part, for all the stuff outside the numbers, one of my main concerns with him has been accuracy outside the numbers. He can throw it on time, but there's times it's not that he's late. He's consistently hitting the inside shoulder on those out routes, which like at some point DB's going to jump one of those. You can get your hands on him. He was consistently putting it outside. He's putting it where his guys can make plays on him, and it was all short dink and dunk stuff. But I thought he looked really good outside the numbers, and I thought his deep ball looked better than it has all season. Like there was some, like there was the one to Christian Watson that like Watson slowed down on. There was the one to Jaden Reed that was kind of a huck up and pray because the first thing he was looking at was not there because two guys were in the same spot and then the pocket started breaking down. I mean, I think really I'm not breaking any ground here. It all starts with the offensive line. Yeah. Offensive line needs to be better. They need to be healthier to be better. Tucker Kraft hasn't really done anything. That was the guy you're hoping that grow into a blocker. Like he's not been good in helping out there. Musgrave's been a little better, but they've had such a hard time with the offensive line. They've had a hard time getting stuff on track. So I think based on, it's hard to isolate these things. I mean, as you were saying, it's hard to isolate these things. I think Love, I don't feel better or worse about Love after this game, I guess. Like he was the same guy, right? Like he's calm. For the most part, he's making the right reads. That first interception was bad, but for the most part, he seems to be making the right reads. I think it's a mix of, I like what LeFleur has been calling. I think you can throw some caveats on there, but I like how LeFleur has been calling the games. I think for the most part, he's done a very good job with that. The Lions game was just a nightmare from the beginning, so it's hard to judge based too much on that. But I think I like what he's been doing, but execution's been awful, and some of that is just, I don't know if it's guys doing stuff they're not used to doing, or if it's just a whole bunch of young guys. One of the reasons I wanted Mercedes Lewis back, honestly, it was like get a guy out there that like when things start breaking down, he knows what he's supposed to do. And there's guys, not to knock any of the young guys, but you need all 11 guys doing what they're supposed to be doing. And there's so many times that's one guy in the wrong spot that's blowing stuff up. And I don't think that's a coaching thing. I think that's the growing pain stuff that I think is going to be all season. So it's been frustrating, but it's just been, I think the main issue has just been execution on a lot of this stuff, which sucks because there's not really a good, easy fix for that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the really hard part too, like we don't typically see a ton of emotion out of Matt LeFluer. He's kind of just on the sidelines regardless of if they're up by 40, if they're down by 25. Like he's got a poker face, and you can he has concern on his face, right? Like his expression changes. But this was the first time I felt like we saw him like when he got after Luke Musgrave. Like that doesn't really feel like the LeFluer we've known for the last 4 seasons. Yeah. So you can tell there's like frustration mounting and tension that, I think the coaching staff, they realize like this is a year we're supposed to be evaluating our quarterback, and we have a good football team on paper. The defense is doing enough to win us football games, but be successful. It's like you said, nothing happens in a vacuum. So like you need the offensive line to be blocking. You can't throw 2 tight ends at Max Crosby who both whiff on a block and then expect that to go anywhere. Like it's just a lot of frustration. And Jordan Love, I think, has handled it as well as he could have. Christian Watson, full accountability in his presser, saying he has to be better. Like the guys know what they need to do. And I think that they can turn things around, but it's also hard to think about. And I guess that's a question you don't have the answer to, but how do you think this team can turn things around? Because they had 10 days to prepare for the Raiders, a really bad defense, a not very good offense, and they lost that game. What changes after the bye when you're playing a worse Broncos team on the road again?
It's tough because the answer is simplify stuff, but I think they've already relatively simplified stuff. And one of the things that encouraged me, I think LeFleur has done better at second half adjustments this year than we've seen him in the past. Like some of the stuff they've done coming out of halftime. I mean, the Saints game is an easy example because they came back and won that game, but there has been stuff's not working, scrap it. And I think this game, to me, was one that I was impressed with. I mean, again, the running game, not great, but this is something that 2 years ago, I feel like as I said, I don't know how they were in the building. It seemed like there was a pretty large assumption based on the fact that he played the previous weekend that Jones was going to play.
Yeah.
this week. And then it was like the day before he was ruled out. It was that afternoon he was officially ruled out, but there was rumblings only a day before. This is an issue. This is something in the past. I think LeFluer would just gone like, we don't have time to do anything. We're scrapping the game plan, or we're just going to do the same game plan. We're doing, because with Jones in there again, you're doing a lot of the wide zone stuff. You're doing a lot of counter stuff, the kind of the attack on the edges, the stuff that he wants to do to get those linebackers flowing. The fact that they went simple and they went like so heavy inside zone duo, smash you in the mouth, Dylan stuff. I don't think that's something he would have done 2 years ago. So I think there's growth there, and I think he has it in him to dial this back. And again, some of it is simplified. We've seen him dial up different things every week, to the point where like there's not one thing they've been leaning on, but there is stuff that they can lean on. There is stuff that they can go to. Like a lot of the quick game stuff has been the same. Like that's been relatively simple. I think they can pare some stuff down. I think they can get Jordan Love on the move a little bit more. He's been very good when creating, but also with the offensive line the way it is, I think they have to move him out a little bit more. So I think there's things you can do. And really, it's just, when you're looking at week to week game plan, you're looking at week to week, how how can we execute better? It's paring that down. It's taking your practice time on it. That's the air raid stuff. It's just like, we've got 5 plays because we've got limited practice time, and we're just drilling these 5 plays over and over again. Not that they need to go to 5 plays or anything. I'm not advocating for the Packers. I might be advocating for the Packers to go air raid. But I think they need to pare it down. Just like, all right, we need to be experts at these 10 concepts, like 2 running concepts and 8 passing concepts. We need to be experts, and then everything else we build off of that. And I think against the Broncos, you can do that, and then you get really good at that, and you build off a little more. So I think they just need to strip it down, go back to basics, and then just get everyone on the same page with a lot of that stuff. Because it's been, again, offensive line has been a mess, and that sucks. And there's nothing you can do about that. But I think if you can get the passing game in a rhythm, if you can get those guys kind of doing what they're supposed to do, I think you can build off of that. So I don't know. I think that's what they need to do, and I assume that's what they're going to be looking at going to that Broncos game in a couple of weeks.
So I know that it's still early, right? Like, I guess I say that it's early and it's not early. You're a fourth of the way through the season at this point. There's not a lot you can totally change at this point. But I know, there's always circulation floating around of thoughts how, all the Twitter GMs would improve things for the team. Do you think that would you add a vet at any position? Do you think some of those things are really impactful on offense, or do you think the best assessment we can get of Love with this young offense is to give these guys reps? Like, would bringing a vet into the wide receiver room help? Would it hurt? Because then you have guys like Dontavian Wicks not getting snaps?
I think it depends on the vet, because that's a very easy answer. But I think it back to like last year, it was Sammy Watkins, but then Sammy Watkins is running the wrong routes. I think the time to get a vet would have been in the offseason. Again, like Mercedes Lewis. Now if Devontae Adams is on the table, like, giddy up, man. Like I do think that veteran presence is helpful. But at this point in the season, if they are kind of wait and see, like you said, like at this point, I want to see Dontavian Wicks on the field. I don't want to see him off the field.
Right.
So if that's gonna be the deciding factor, I'd like to do that. I think there is value in a vet, but I think bringing a vet in off the street that doesn't know the LeFluer system, that doesn't know any of the guys in there, I don't think that helps right now. But if there's someone out there, and I haven't looked at who's out there, if there's someone out there who knows LeFluer, knows some of these guys, has been around the system, has been in the league, been with the Packers even a couple years ago, bring a guy like that back, and just like, you're getting 5 snaps a game, but you're here as essentially like a de facto coach, I'd be all for it. But I think that was kind of more of an off-season thing, would be my guess. I think they're just going to sink or swim, and we've seen how that's gone the past couple weeks.
So that kind of segues into, before we flip to the defense, on Pack a Day last week, because we didn't have a post game to talk about, Andrew and Kyle and I looked at like our off-season predictions and how they were kind of aligning so far through the first 4 weeks. This was obviously before the Raiders game. And we said, like, this is when you need to start building momentum. You have the Raiders, you have the Broncos, you have the Vikings, then you have the Rams. And then it gets hard. Like, then you're playing Smash Mouth. You've got the Steelers, the Lions, the Chiefs. Like, doesn't get easy. So this is when you have to start stacking the wins and being successful. And I'm not sure what your season prediction was before the season started, but Andrew and I had said 10-7 and Kyle had said 9-8. So what, I guess, was your expectation for this team, and has that perspective changed? And do you think that this team can bounce back, or do you think that right now we are on a trajectory that is not a pleasant one?
I'm trying to remember what I said. I want to say I was 10-7. But I was probably 12-5. If I'm being honest with myself, that's probably what I was. I tend to be a little more optimistic. I look at the pieces. I look at the schedule. I look at the division and go, I talk myself into this. They're going to win 16 games this year. I was probably, yeah, I was probably about 12-5 would be my guess. So yeah, I'd say it has to change because I don't think they're going to lose only 2 games. The rest of the way. That'd be pretty sweet. Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because you want to say again, like you want to say coming into this game, they had that long layoff. This was you make the adjustments, you go into the bye week with a big, convincing, happy win over a terrible Raiders team, and then you feel comfortable. I mean, right now, I don't feel comfortable coming out of the bye. They're going to beat the Broncos. I know the Broncos are like bad, but I don't feel comfortable right now saying this. So I think they've got a chance to do it. At this point, I'll believe it when I see it. It's I don't want to repeat the same talking points. There's been no consistency with this team. The most consistent part of this team has been the defense. I think, which is just absolutely shocking to me. They can't get anything going offensively for more than 2 drives, and then everything kind of falls apart. So I think they can. I mean, if they're growing together, if this offensive line gets healthy, because that's what I try to remind myself. Like Jenkins was back, and their kind of preferred starters for the rest of the season was there. John Runyon was in a walking boot like 3 days before the game. Zach Tom clearly is hobbled. Elton Jenkins is 100%. So if those guys can get healthy, if the offensive line can get right, if Jones can get healthy, and you've got Christian Watson now out there, like this was like his first full game. You get Dobbs worked in a little bit more. You get them playing off each other, which you saw towards the end of last season, like what they can do. They're just rarely on the field together at the same time. I think they can build momentum. Like I believe that they can. But I also, at this point, I'm not going to talk myself into them being that team until I actually see it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sentiment that we had kind of established was, and I feel like there's always a little asterisk here, like the goal of this season is to evaluate Jordan Love, and the
Mhm,
rest is kind of gravy. Like it doesn't really matter what the record is. You're getting your young guys experience, but there are some decisions that are going to have to be made. Like we have both running backs that are going into contract years. You don't know if the starting running back is even, on the team this year,
mhm,
if that's something they'd look to in the draft. So there are some big questions, but Jordan Love, it's really hard to evaluate your talent when they're running for their life and their receivers are dropping balls. Like, I think I keep saying we're going to shift to the defense, but like that final drive, it really felt like something was going to happen. And you
mhm,
kind of feel for Jordan Love in those moments when I thought for sure Dobbs had that easy completion and it was a miss, and then Luke Musgrave. And I know that the Christian Watson one was tough because that felt like it was not on the same page. If that's like Rodgers and Jordy or Rodgers and Devontae, that's an easy 6. Like there's different scenarios and things have to be taken with a grain of salt when it's your young quarterback. But it just felt like, in moments, even the 77 yarder to Watson early in the game, that horse collar, I think, saved the Raiders the game, right?
mhm.
Because if Watson scores, then the defense has played well enough to keep you
Yep.
in the lead here. So that just a lot stacked against this team. And we've seen them overcome adversity, obviously, in person at the
Yeah.
Saints game, but it seems like just repeatedly they're getting the chip stacks against them week after week, and it's kind of hard to climb out of those holes.
Well, I'll even say that game-ending interception, I'll even say, like, that was you talk about Love's eyes going the right place. Eyes were in the right place. Like, they were, Raiders were aligned. They had, like, 2 high safeties, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Watson was the ISO on that side or something. He's running a go route on the left side. He kinda checks that initially, and the Raiders guys, the Raider safety's cheating down. So he knows he's got him. You can see him, he's even hitching. He's gonna throw that. He's got him in rhythm, and then someone, I can't remember who it was, I think it was Josh Myers, because his dog walked into him. So he has to break pocket. He can't throw it at the time. So when he breaks, he's like, I know I got him. So the ball's out a little late because he's moving, but he also knows I've got Watson 1-on-1. I know he's gonna cook that guy. I know I've got him. So that was one. If the offensive line held up for another half second, I think it's a touchdown. I think he hits him in rhythm. It comes out. I think that's another. He made the right read. Eyes were in the right place. He knew exactly what to do. Offensive line gave him like no time on that one, which sucks. So that's another one. But like, how do you evaluate that? Because like that was not the read. That was an alert. Like he looked at that. He read. He saw the matchup based on that. He knew he had it on one-on-one. That's exactly what you want to do. He would have moved off of that. That safety was back. So that's a good quarterback play up until the point he throws the ball short. Like, how do you evaluate that?
Yeah, we'll have to see what the Andy Herman grades are for the offense on that one, because I mean it's absolutely true. And then flipping it to the defensive side of the ball, you have your All Pro back in Jair, and you've got Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell's a no-go, and then Quay gets hurt, and then, all of a sudden it's Isaiah McDuffie and Eric Wilson in the middle
Yeah.
of the defense for your entirety of your game, and Darnell Savage gets hurt, and Rudy Ford played really well,
Mhm.
obviously snagged another interception, but, then you've got Jonathan Owens back there, and really hard to find consistency then on the defensive side of the ball when you've got all these moving pieces as
Mhm.
well. And, Packers fans scoffed at the week 6 bye in the offseason because you always want like the mid-season bye, but this is a desperately needed bye. But it also is a concern to this point that it's so early because this is a banged up football team, and I don't think a week is going to
Yeah.
do a lot for some of these guys.
No, I don't think it is either. I mean, and it's some of the, my hope was that a lot of these guys are close enough to where like maybe they will be back. The extra week will do some good. But then we thought Aaron Jones was going to be back this past week. But if he was like close enough that he was like a game time call almost, like, well, maybe another week will give him. I mean, to me, it's less at this point, it's less about getting healthy and more about like, all right, what do we need to do? Like this is a mess, and obviously the offensive line needs to be healthy. And so, I mean, some of the skill position guys. I mean, Watson's back. Those guys are healthy. What do we need to do offensive? And it's my own bent, Maggie. I don't care about the defense. Like I do, but I don't like whatever they want to do on that side of the ball. I don't particularly care about. But offensively, like it's been such fits and starts that if they can just use this to like reset themselves a little bit. All right, we knew coming in this was going to be a little stop and go. This was going to be kind of a rough year overall. That we were going to be learning stuff. What did we learn over the first 5 weeks? What did we do well? What didn't we do well? What do we need to change? Like it's a very good time for that to then try to shift. It's almost because they did that in last year, right? They didn't shift their defense after the bye. It was just a week 13 bye, and it was too late at that point. Like if they want to change stuff, like now's the time. I'm all about it. And health or no health, just see, like that self scout. What did we do well? What do we need to change? What can we simplify? I think the bye week is when they look to do that. So having it now, I hope we will see a slightly better, well, or less squeaky unit, I guess, coming out of the bye.
So they were good, right? The Raiders had 96 total yards, it looks like, on the ground. So the Packers finally held the team to under 100 rushing yards.
We did it.
Josh Jacobs had 69 yards. So pretty impressive performance, I guess, from the run defense. Garoppolo only had his 208 yards, took 3 sacks, threw a pick. Like the defense is doing what it needs to do. And Matt LeFluer said, like, anytime your defense can hold a team to 17 points, you expect to win those games as an
Mhm.
offense. So I don't want to put you on the hot seat here, but is it Joe Barry, Dusty? How hot is Joe Barry's seat? Because he's always the scapegoat on Twitter, and obviously the Preston Smith on Devontae Adams thing did not help his case, but he also has flashes where he really is putting his guys in positions to be successful. But then there's head scratchers where I think it was the Falcons game where they had a light box and like Justin Hollins was your edge rusher on a 3rd and goal. Like,
Yeah.
so where's your thought, I guess, on the Joe Barry defense?
So for the Preston thing, first of all, if you've not read it, the Justice Mosqueda did a great thing at Acme Packing Company where he wrote that up. That was very illuminating. I thought it was amazing. One of the things I didn't think about was the fact that like at that point, both of the linebackers and the safety were gone. So like anyone who was going to make a check, like Eric Wilson is not making that check. So that was very interesting read. I thought. I am of the mind that Joe Barry should be gone. I'm not mad about it. I'm not going to yell about it. I think Joe Barry should be gone, not necessarily for what has happened this year, because I think the defense has, not been a bright spot because there still have been baffling things. I still just think not using some of his players correctly.
Mm.
There's, I think, I don't know. I think he runs what he learned to run, but doesn't necessarily know like why he runs it, which makes it kind of hard to fix once you kind of get under the hood. But whatever. I think Joe Barry has proven over his time in Green Bay he is not good or consistent. Does not consistently put his guys in position to succeed. Does not change things up when he needs to change things up. And I mean, to me, that's the big thing. If you've got guys that are good at things and then you do not consistently put those guys in a position to do things, like one of their best performances when Jair Alexander like bullied Joe Barry into like, I'm taking Justin Jefferson. I don't care what you say. And then he's like, okay. And then a couple years ago against the Lions when they were getting gashed and Matt LeFluer at halftime was like, blitz Jared Goff. What are you doing? And then they came out and shut him down in the second half. I don't think that bodes well. So again, I don't think it's this year. I think it's what he's done in time with the Packers. I just don't think he's a good defensive coordinator. I didn't love the hire at the time, and I don't think he's done enough to say like because my assumption. I don't think they've released the terms on this. My assumption is that this is the last year of his contract. Same thing with Pettin, where they just let him walk. if they sign Joe Barry to an extension, people will burn his house to the ground. I will not. Some people will, but yeah, I don't. Again, I don't think it's this year. I just think what he's shown, what he's done, some of his downsides. I don't think he deserves to be here after this year. I don't think you fire him mid-season, but I don't think he deserves to be here after this year.
It honestly feels like the exact opposite of what's happening with the offense, where the offense is that you have growing pains, but the scheme is doing enough to help them. The defense feels like the scheme is hurting them, but the players are good enough to overcome those deficiencies. So it's like a really, because on paper, I mean, Mina Kimes has said it. There's a lot of talking heads that talk about how this defense is, or maybe not this season
Yeah.
with more rookies, but should be a top 5, like top 8 unit in the league, given that they've got huge names, all pros at a couple different positions, and then the product on the field just doesn't match. So I don't know. I think you could argue at the time that it made sense with an inexperienced head coach and wanting somebody
Yeah.
that's been around for a while, but be your defense, we talked about all these contracts that are coming up soon on offense, and you wanna get production out of your guys while you have them under contract, because we know Rashawn Gary's gonna get an extension soon, or he
Hmm.
better. Maybe they'll get that done during the bye at least. But this defense is gonna be together, you'd hope, for a while, so you need somebody that can come in and get the most out of them. Did you have, any, like, we talked about the offense, right, and how they can fix or, be hindered by these things. What can the defense do coming out of the bye? Is it, like you said, putting guys in better positions? Is it a self scout? Or do we think it's just that guys like Jair are going to be Jair and keep the team together even through some bad coaching?
I don't think it matters because I don't think Joe Barry is changing his stripes. Like Joe Barry started running stunts, and it was a big thing. Like, ooh, he's not even blitzing; he's just running stunts, and that was like Joe Barry's big thing. Everyone's been doing that since like the '70s, man. Like, this is nothing. I don't think they're going to change. So I don't think they're going to do anything. I've been saying for a couple of years now. Like, I don't. Scheme is scheme. Offensive scheme is one thing. Defensive scheme, there's maybe 3 or 4 active in the NFL at any given time for the most part. Like, it's reactive. You have your shell, you have your rules, and I mean it's more complicated than that. But there's really only a handful of those around. So I don't think it matters what you're running. It's that you run it well and that you run it aggressively. The thing with Barry is that, like, he wants to obviously play. He wants to play a little soft, right? You rally and tackle, and then aside from the first year, they haven't been that good at tackling. But I understand the idea behind it. But there's too many, like, not this year, I guess, but last year it was too many. It was like they were playing soft, but also blowing coverages. So, like, if you can't, his first year they played sound on the back end. Like, if you watch
Mhm.
those safeties rotate, like, it was like, okay, like these guys know what they're doing. And then that kind of fell off. So I think if the offense does not pick it up, you need a defense that just is going to go for it occasionally. That's going to be like, okay, I might give up a 70-yard touchdown over my head, or I might take this sucker back to the house. Like, you need to create turnovers, you need to create chaos. And they just haven't been doing that. They've got guys like Kenny Clark's been a wrecking ball up front. Rashawn Gary, we know what Rashawn Gary's been doing. Jair, we know Jair. Rasul, we know Rasul loves to jump him around. Like, they've got guys who are, if not ball hawks by their resume, desperately want to be, like, have
Mhm.
that mindset of doing that. And they need to get those guys in position to do that, like, and just give them the ability to freelance a little bit, whether that's like kind of shading a safety over Jair and telling him, okay, if it's an in breaker, jump it, like, we got you, or we don't got you, and then make that mistake at 100 miles an hour. And if they give up a touchdown, you give up a touchdown. I just think if it's evaluation year anyway, and if the offense is not doing that well, the best thing to do, I think, is create chaos, cause turnovers. And with the soft defense, like, if they're not rallying and tackling, they're going to give up 12 play drives, and you're keeping Jordan Love off the field. You're not getting good evaluation there. And then you're also not providing the offense with short fields and giving them good opportunities. So, I mean, they picked off Jimmy G. They should have at least one more, maybe two more, I think, in this game. But I think given those guys, just play with your hair on fire. I don't care what we're playing. Give them the ability to play downhill and just jump what you want to jump. Try to cause some chaos to turnovers. Like, I think that's the biggest thing that they need to do.
Yeah, I know there was like a clip of the quote that got taken out of context, but Jair had basically said, like, you have a young offense, they're developing. The defense needs to do a better job of forcing turnovers and scoring points on our own and doing what we can to help the offense, because they are young and
Mhm.
they are struggling a little bit to get things going. And of course, the internet ran with that, saying that there's no confidence in the offense. But his point is valid, and what you're saying is exactly right, where you need to just put these guys in positions to get after it and make plays. And I talked about it a couple weeks ago on the show. Matt LeFluer has called out Darnell Savage 2 or 3 times at this point, saying that he's always the guy on the sideline saying, "We got you, coach. Don't worry about it." And the defense has that mentality. Like, they want to be that kind of defense, and they're just not being put in situations where they can be. So hopefully we see some change after the bye, but I'm with you where I just don't necessarily see that being the case. So let's go ahead then and switch to our last little segment of the show where we give out game balls. We talk about stock up, stock down, and favorite play of the game. So let's start with your game ball. Who would get your game ball this week?
Oh man.
Anyone.
Boy, so many people to choose from, Maggie. So many great games. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'll give it to AJ Dillon. He's been a bit of a punching bag. Did not, again, 3.7 yards per carry, not the best, but this was the most physical. He'll do this where he'll start out slow and you're like, he's a big guy. When does he run through people? And then he'll have games like this and you find out that he will run through people. He had the really nice 11-yard gain, the little cutback, a little jump cut that was just perfectly blocked and down inside the red zone. I think he did that. He had some where he was hit 2 yards down and ended up with a 6-yard gain. So I don't think the best game overall statistically from him, but I think as far as aggressiveness, what you want to see out of him, I think his best game of the year. So it's slim picking. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to AJ Dillon.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And this is probably cheating too, but I'll give mine to Rudy Ford because I think there was a lot of inconsistency on the defensive side of the ball. And all off season, we asked who was going to be the starting safety opposite Darnell Savage. And, Rudy Ford has held down the job through its entirety of the season. And he continues to be the guy on defense forcing turnovers in the secondary. So he'll get my game ball. How about stock up? It kind of ties into your game ball, I guess. AJ Dillon probably has the highest stock after getting our stock down award for maybe the last 4 weeks. So stock up.
I will give it not the best game for him. I'll give it to Christian Watson, just because this was first full game back. I still don't think 100%. I think if he's 100%, I think he scores a touchdown. But I think he showed again the speed of what he can do to a defense. He had a chance at a couple other balls. He had the one they slowed down on. He didn't bring in. He had the one at the end that he was not to sound sour grapes here. That's defensive pass interference. If on that last play of the game, if that was a receiver that stiff arm behind him, full extension, that's offensive pass interference every single time. So he's fading back. It looks worse than it was. I still think you can go up and try to fight through that a little bit more to draw that call. So there's a couple of things you could have done better, but I think the speed of him out there, what he's able to do, just a couple times with the ball in his hands. That was a broken play he got free on, and then that's 30 yards down the field, and he turns into a 77-yard gain. So I will give it to Christian Watson just because I desperately want Christian Watson to be good and having a full game of him and doing good things. I will give it to him because I think he's only going to get better from here.
I'll give my stock up to Eric Wilson with the caveat that we hope he's not going to be a starting inside linebacker. But I thought in spot duty he came in and I thought he played really well. I think he was kind of always around the ball. And Isaiah McDuffie, I know, recorded the team lead in combined and total tackles, but I felt like Eric Wilson was everywhere. And you hope Quay's back. It sounds like Devondre is going to be back after the bye, which is promising. But in spot duty, stock up for Eric Wilson, who I know is also a mainstay on special teams. Stock down then.
I'll go. I hate to do this. I'll go Tucker Kraft.
Okay.
And I hate to do it because he's rookie tight end. I don't expect much in a normal year in the Packers. He's seeing the field 3 snaps a game. He's a special teamer if he's active at all. He's aside from the fact that there's no production there, which I don't particularly care about. There's not a lot of production there. The thing that you would hope he'd be good at, he has not been good at. The blocking. He seems lost. He's running into guys. He had the one whiff on Max Crosby, which I get. There was an 11-yard game by Dillon that he did the same thing. I think Crosby just got wise to him. Did the same thing, lined him up. Crosby went wide, and then Tucker Kraft dove at him and blocked him out of the way. Did exactly what he's supposed to do. Crosby's good and smart. He didn't get him the next time, so that sucks for Tucker Kraft. But I would hope with him getting more playing time that we would see a little more growth there, a little bit more he does one thing really well, and I don't care about the rest of it. So far, he's not done a single thing well. So, not saying that he's going to be terrible, but I hope we were going to see like at least one highlight of Tucker Craft just like plowing through someone on like on a slice block, and he just hasn't done it yet. So I'll do stock down, but that's really my own expectations for Tucker Craft that I had him on the high end in the first place, I think.
I'm going to say Keyshawn Nixon. And I say that because I do give him credit for fair catching the ball a little bit more and, taking it out at the 25, because that was just
Gracious.
brutal last week. Like, I appreciate him wanting, everybody thinks they can be the spark plug, and he's an all pro, right? Like he can literally be that for the team, but it wasn't working against the Lions. And I think he, like you said, wised up to it a little bit this week, but a couple miscues on the defensive side of the ball, had that should have been, house pick in the red zone that ended up scoring for the Raiders. So kind of some miscommunication, and I think he can still be an effective slot corner, but at this point, just not the best out of him the first couple weeks. Favorite play? There aren't that many to choose from, so you have to have at least a favorite play.
Oh man, I hate to go back to the Christian Watson one. I'll go back to the Christian Watson one. Just that's one, and that one's less Christian Watson. That 77-year gain, and more Jordan Love. Because that was a kind of out of structure play. It's a concept they run all the time, and generally they don't even look to Christian Watson on that. That is because he's got like the deep takeoff, usually trying to hit Dobbs underneath on like the intermediate crossing route. And then if not, you had, I think it was Musgrave underneath. No, it was Reed. It was Reed underneath. That they both converge. It was the two safeties with busted coverage. They converged on Dobbs when Love was getting ready to throw it. He saw Watson at the last minute. Now there's a couple different things. One of the things I liked is that he looked up and saw Watson and was like, "I'm going to throw this," because good recognition on his part to see those guys converging. Know he had Watson. Know the backside safety wasn't going to get there and throw it. We've also seen that stuff in the past where Love he'll try to be perfect with it. He'll try to lead him upfield with guys wide open, and he'll miss him. There's a miscommunication, or he overthrows it or something. He put it on him. He underthrew the ball, which in that situation, he's rolling left. You put it on him. You give your guy a chance to make a catch, and if he makes a play afterwards, fine. If not, it's still 30 yards. So I like that. I like that he saw him. I like that instead of trying to be perfect with the ball, he just put on Christian Watson, let him stop, catch the ball, knew he had time, and then just make a play out of it. So again, I will go with that play, but it's more just the recognition and then some of the growth of Jordan Love in terms of where he threw that ball is why I liked it. And also, it was the biggest gain of the day, so it's pretty easy.
As the offensive guru, yeah, that's fair. I'm going to take the Jordan Love scramble for 26 yards. I think I read that it was his longest of his career, which, short career, but still impressive. I think it was after the Falcons game. He's so poised all the time, and he's so calm and cool and collected that when he gets up and he just chirps a little bit and talks his talk, like, I love that out of him, because it's sometimes what the offense needs. Like, they need to get rolling, they need a spark. And Jordan Love has proven week in and week out that he can be what the offense needs, whether that is a calming presence or he can be the spark plug. So really like to see what he can do with his legs. Rodgers is always really fun doing that, and I love Rodgers to death. He was not the athlete that Jordan Love is with his legs. So some more designed runs out of him and some scrambles, I think, would go a long way for helping the offense that has consistently struggled in the run game. Any final thoughts on this game before we close the book and officially head into the bye week and hopefully get a better outcome when we're able to talk about a worse team after the bye?
I don't know if I have any final thoughts. I don't want to talk about this game anymore, Maggie. No, I think it was ugly. It was ugly. But I do think there was still, again, I think there were signs that as far as Jordan Love, some of the decision making, some of his accuracy in the outside stuff, and LeFluer kind of switching stuff up based on the personnel he had. I think there's, despite the ugliness, I think there was, for me anyway, who I tend to skew optimistic, and I try to beat that out of myself, and I simply cannot. But I think there were signs here that you can be optimistic about. It's just whether they can execute it, I don't know. But there are signs that like they know what they need to do to try to get back on track. They know how defense are playing them, and they're adjusting to it. I think it's promise even in a very frustrating loss.
That's really funny, because Perry and I were like pounding the table, and we said, look, if the Packers don't come out here against the Raiders and win in a, just a dominant fashion, there are alarm bells going off everywhere. So you were honestly the perfect guest for this week, because after talking to you, I'm like, there's not alarm bells at all. The Packers are going to be fine. And maybe it's our green and gold glasses. We both tend to be optimistic people in life in general. So with football, it's like, yeah, sure, optimism. But I I do feel better after the rewatch and sitting with it for a little bit, that I think this team can get on track. But Dusty, thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
joining me this week. It's always fun to talk football. It could go for much longer. If you don't follow Dusty already, for starters, what are you doing? I'm sure that you should be following him if you aren't. Find his work at Cheesehead TV, Packer Report. Um, which one did I forget? Pack a Day.
I was trying to
And
remember.
can you talk about John Kuhn really quick too?
Oh
The
yeah.
cool series that you're doing with John Kuhn, because it
Yeah,
is
no,
just excellent.
that's been great. So we've not recorded this week yet. I think we're going to do that either immediately after this. I'm not sure. Probably tomorrow. I think, from the looks of things. But yeah, that's something Cheesehead TV has given me a really fun example, or a really fun thing to do this year. They hit me with a week before the season. They're like, hey, do you want to sit down with John Kuhn every week and break down film? That sounds awesome. I would love to do that. So yeah, every week I get a chance to sit down with John Kuhn and talk about 3 or 4 plays. Last week was 5 rushing plays, which is great because I don't know a whole lot about the run game, so I have to pick his brain about the run game a little bit. So we say it's usually Tuesdays, usually up Tuesdays over on Cheesehead TV's YouTube channel. This week a little later because of scheduling and Monday Night Football stuff, but it's been awesome. Usually I will pick a play, or he will pick all 3 or whatever, and we'll just kind of go through it. I'll try to set it up a little bit, say what little bit I know, and then just let him cook a little bit, and he gets to talk about the blocking stuff and what he's seeing. And so it's been amazing to be able to sit down weekly with it. Not only a former NFL player, but like a Packers legend, sit down with him on a weekly basis. And that was he was, when I first started writing about football, was 2013 when they first made the film available. So one of my go-tos whenever I get like new software and I want to try it out, my play is always 4th and 8. Week 17, 2013. Kuhn, of course, had that block. So for me, he's played a big part in what I've been doing for the past 10 years, for good or ill, I guess. So we all sit down with him and pick his brain about football stuff in terms of like, I think this is what I'm seeing. Is this correct? And he can tell me, yes, that's right, you're smart, or no, you're dumb. Here's what's really going on. And either way, I learned something. So it's been really awesome this season. So it's been if you've not watched those, go ahead and watch those, I guess. Again, weekly up on Cheesehead TV's YouTube. But it's been a blast. I've learned a ton.
I also really love that you have Vince Lombardi on your shelf behind you, because I have one who's like right. I think my mic is covering him. You
Oh
can kind
yeah.
of see him
Okay.
under. Yep. So I've
Yep.
also got Vince. But that is all the time that we have for today's show. Thank you so much for listening or watching on YouTube. If you're doing that, you can find Dusty on Twitter at Dusty Evely. Please make sure you're checking out all the fantastic work that he does. I learn something every time I talk to Dusty, or read something that he's written, or watch something that he's done, which is really fun and cool. You can find me on Twitter at Maggie J. Loney, the podcast on Twitter at PWSS Podcast, all other socials at Packs What She Said. You can find us on YouTube if that's how you're watching. Thank you so much. Make sure you subscribe. Otherwise, on audio format, everywhere you find your favorite podcasts, make sure to download the show. That really helps out our numbers. Dusty, thank you so much. This was a blast. Can't wait to plan next year's season opener trip with you. But that is all the time that we have. And go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.